Is the SEC still the best conference in college football? Well, on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, the top 5 teams in the SEC lost 5 consecutive games against quality opponents from other leagues, and that got a whole lot of attention. Let's bring it back into perspective. Let's look at the entire league's performance against the other 4 major conferences throughout the entire 2014 regular season and postseason. If you listen to me on MarkRogersTV on a continuous basis, then you know that I don't think there's enough games played, nearly enough games played between the Power 5 conferences. The SEC only played 11 games against the other 4 major conferences during the regular season. They went 5-6. 11 games. Think about that. It seems like 11. Okay, that's a substantial sample size until you consider that the SEC played 56 non-conference games. 56. 14 teams, 4 non-conference games per team. They had 56 opportunities. They played 11 against the other power conferences. So this is the breakdown. So including the bowl games, you had 11 wins, you had 11 losses for the SEC. Check out our previous video post to better understand how we broke this down, because you could just say 11-11, the SEC's average. But we need to delve into it, because what were the matchups? You got to bring it into context in regards to, was a 10th place team from the SEC losing to a 2nd place team in the ACC, as we saw in the last weekend of the regular season with Louisville defeating Kentucky and Clemson over South Carolina in particular, and Florida State. That game was a 1-8. So those have to be taken into context. So here we've built a system that credits those wins, but also puts them into context. So we tweak the wins and the losses to give a better perspective on who should defeat who and give a value. We're really giving a value for the wins and the losses. So we start with this. Okay, the SEC went 11-11 against the other 4 conferences. In those winning games, those 11 games that the SEC won, the SEC's record for the teams that won those games was a composite 95-50 against the teams that they played were 84-59. So that's pretty comparable. Actually, it's really comparable when you consider the SEC won all those 11 games. So if you take those games out, their records are almost exact. The SEC went 48-42 within the league. That's a conference record. For those teams that won those 11 matchups against the other Power 5 conferences, the SEC was 48-42. The other teams 54-40. So the SEC was actually taking lesser teams in its league and beating better teams in the other leagues. And the way this is really displayed is that the average seed for the SEC, so I seeded all the teams, and again, if you want to understand the seeding process a little bit better, check out the latest video, the last one we posted. So the average SEC seed in those 11 games was 7.1. They defeated an average seed in the other conferences of 6.3, so they were playing a little bit up and winning those games. In the losses, the SEC fielded teams that had a composite record of 84-49, 52-30 in the conference. So pretty good SEC teams playing really good non-conference teams that went 111-37 overall and 61-26. And this really plays out and is displayed, again, much more so in the seeding. The average seed in these SEC 11 losses was 6.4 for the SEC, 3.7 for the other leagues, meaning Ohio State as a 1 seed defeated Alabama. That plays into this. Florida State defeated Florida. FSU, a 1 seed in the ACC, and on and on and on. TCU is a 2 seed out of the Big 12, defeating Ole Miss. So the SEC played some really strong competition out of conference there in those losses, an average of seed of 3.7. So what are these numbers here? That's a quality win. That's the quality of the win, the quality of the average loss. That's a pretty high figure. I think it will be. We're going to have to go through all the conferences and see how this stacks up. But what we did, and we explained this in the previous video, is we assigned 10 points for every win, and we went -10 for every loss. So we started there. That was the starting point. And then we took the seeds into account. So, for example, Ohio State defeated Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. So that's an SEC loss. So that's a -10 for the SEC. and both teams were 1 seeds in their conferences. So that's a wash. So that stays as a -10. Where that comes into play is, let's say Alabama defeated West Virginia. Alabama's a 1 seed in the SEC. They defeated West Virginia, a 6 seed in the Big 12. So Alabama should defeat West Virginia. The way we measured that and the way that works into the formula is Alabama's given 10 points for defeating West Virginia to start. But since it's a 1 versus a 6, that's a 5 seed difference. So 5 points come off that win. So that's now a 5-point win for the SEC over the Big 12. So when we do the Big 12, they're going to lose 5 points for that West Virginia loss against Alabama. So we take the seeds into account. And really, this plays out as you look at, and it makes a whole lot of sense when you look at these numbers and then look at just the actual wins and losses for the SEC. The wins are quality wins. They really didn't have any bad losses outside of that horrendous, atrocious loss, is what I was trying to say, with Indiana defeating Missouri. So how does that shake out? Missouri's a 2 seed in the SEC. Again, they had the 2nd best record in the SEC, so they're a 2 seed in the SEC. Indiana, a 13 seed in the Big 10. So the SEC automatically gets -10 for the loss, and then it's an 11 seed difference. So another 11 points come off that loss, so the SEC goes -21 in that game. Other than that game, the SEC fared pretty well. LSU beat Wisconsin. That was a 7-3. Auburn beat Kansas State. That was a 6-3. You had the Georgia-Clemson win, a 4-3. Georgia beat Louisville. They were both 4 seeds. Missouri over Minnesota, 2-4. The 2 West Virginia wins for the SEC, Alabama and Texas A&M. So that's a 1 seed and a 9 seed defeated the 6 seed West Virginia. Miami and South Carolina, that's an 11 seed out of the SEC defeating a 10 seed out of the ACC. Comparable matchup. Iowa, a 7 seed out of the Big 10, loses to Tennessee, a 10 seed out of the SEC. Arkansas, 12 seed. I know they're better than that, or people think they are, but they finished a 12 seed at 2-6 in the SEC. Defeats Texas, a 5 seed. In the last matchup in the regular season, Texas Tech and Arkansas. Arkansas, the 12 seed, defeated Texas Tech, the 8 seed, out of the Big 12. So it's not a perfect process. We're not considering the games played against the Mountain West and the MAC and the Sun Belt and the other conferences. This is a closed environment survey and measurement within the Power 5. Yes, Ole Miss defeated a good Boise State team, the 1 seed out of the Mountain West. That's not taken into consideration here. This is just a closed measurement of the Power 5 conferences. Again, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. The losses, let's run them down real quick. Ohio State defeated Alabama. That was a 1 versus a 1. Wisconsin beat Auburn. A 3 seed out of the Big 10 defeats the 6 seed out of the SEC. So that's not a crushing loss. It's understandable. We gave Notre Dame a 5 seed. That's where we had to be a little objective or subjective, and gave Notre Dame a 5 seed as an 8-5 team. So we included the independents in this. Notre Dame, the 5 seed, defeats LSU, the 7. Georgia Tech with 2 wins over the SEC, but the Yellow Jackets, a 2 seed, defeat Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Mississippi State and Georgia, the 3 and 4 seeds. Again, TCU, the 1 over Ole Miss, the 5. Indiana, the 13 over Mizzou, the 2. Florida State, the 1 over the Gators, the 8. Louisville, a 4 seed, defeats Kentucky, a 13 seed. So, for example, not a huge loss for the SEC there because that's a 9 seed difference. So, 10 given for the loss, but take away 9 for the seed difference, and the SEC only loses 1 point there. Oklahoma, 4 seed over Tennessee, a 10. Very understandable there. Yes, again, we don't take into consideration the other conferences. This is a closed experiment and survey and matchup between the Power 5. So let me know what you think about this. Where did I miss it? What could be tweaked? What could be improved? I think it's a decent measurement, and we'll go from here and go through the other 4 conferences right here on Mark Rogers TV.